Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Ayza Omar. We are coming to you live from the Lahore studios. The International Court of Justice at The Hague, the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, they've delivered their verdict on Gulbhushan Jadhav's case. 15 judges, they ruled 15-1 in favor of India being granted consular access to the 49-year-old Indian national who was detained in Pakistan since his arrest in March 2016. He was sentenced to death for espionage and invoking terrorism by a Pakistan military court. Now, President of the ICJ, Judge Abdul Qavi Ahmed Yusuf, read out the verdict, which stated that Pakistan must provide consular access to Gulbhushan Jadhav and that the stay on the sentence be maintained. Let me tell you a little about Gulbhushan Jadhav, who was sentenced to death in April 2017 by a Pakistani military court on charges of terrorism and spying. He was arrested in Bashkil in Balochistan in Pakistan in March 2016 in a counterintelligence operation. Now, he's confessed on video that he was operating in Pakistan for 10 years under orders of India's leading spy agency, Research and Analysis Wing, for information gathering and was responsible for a number of terrorist attacks in Karachi and funding the rebel separatist movement, the Balochistan Liberation Movement, which, by the way, just recently, a few weeks ago, the US has recognized as a terrorist organization. So we will be speaking to our guests tonight on the important points that have been highlighted in this case after the verdicts come out by the ICJ. And for that, let me introduce who we have on the panel with us. We'll be talking to, of course, Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa. Welcome to Newswire once again here in our Lahore studios. Also, we have Mr. Jamal Aziz, the Executive Director for Research Society of International Law. Welcome. You're joining us here from Islamabad. I'm going to start with you, Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa. We're talking about here about the consular access, which was essentially the most contentious issue that India took to the ICJ once it finally woke up to the fact that, yes, their Indian national was in Pakistan, was sentenced to death for espionage terrorism charges. Now, in your view, there is, of course, across the border, a lot of hoopla going on that this is a big win for India. But if we were to break it down and understand what exactly has happened and translates into facts, that this was an Indian national and now accepted by India, was here on spying and causing terrorism, how do you see the verdict?
I think India needs to sit back and think at it again. The International Court of Justice actually have stamped that he is a spy in Pakistan. That by itself speaks a lot for Pakistan. Second, more importantly, that Pakistan's justice system, which invariably comes under question within the country itself, and of course, the others take cue from that, that has been accepted. That Pakistan's justice system is not only functional, but it's done a wonderful job at that. As regards the consular access, I think on ground, nothing has changed, frankly. He still continues to be in Pakistani jail, and he has to face terrorism charges as yet. That has not yet been brought up, and that has not been discussed as such. He has been sentenced to death. This mercy appeal is lying with the Chief of Army Staff, in which he has confessed everything.
Right.
So on ground, frankly, nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. What has changed, in fact, is that the ICJ came out with its verdict today. Basically, and I'll spell this out in simple words for our viewers, that there is absolutely no acquittal involved, which was the basic prayer of India, yes, that please release, that Gulbhushan Jadhav should be released. That's not happening. They have accepted that he is been tried by the military court in Pakistan and hence been found guilty, and that still stands. Yes. So here I want to pull you in, Mr. Jamal Aziz. Can you do research on international law? You've got a handle on these things. I mean, it's pretty complicated when you look at it from the text of the verdict itself, but break it down for us. That the main points here, that the acquittal has been, that India's plea has been rejected, that Gulbhushan Jadhav is not going to go scot-free. He is going to be held accountable for his being a spy in another state. Tell us a little about that.
So I think it's an extremely favorable verdict for Pakistan. I think this is probably the best case scenario that we could have hoped for. Let me break it down. There are two aspects to this decision, to this judgment. One was whether the ICJ had jurisdiction to hear the case in the first place, and whether Pakistan had violated the Vienna Convention by not giving consular access to Jadhav. That was one aspect. On that, the court held that it did have jurisdiction and that Pakistan did violate the Vienna Convention by not giving consular access to Jadhav. But here's where it gets interesting. India had asked for certain reliefs. So all the reliefs that India has asked for, the court has denied. Whether it was annulment of the decision, as you pointed out, the court did not annul the decision of the military court. India had requested that the ICJ declare that Pakistan is in violation of international law. That has not happened. India had asked Pakistan to release Jadhav and permit him safe passage to India. That has not happened. And so all of these aspects, I think the relief has been a very positive thing. The only thing which which the ICJ has asked Pakistan to do is to review and reconsider the conviction and sentence. And this point is very important.
Right, and this is something it also, would you highlight for us, while it says in these words to review and reconsider, that essentially highlights the fact that Pakistan is under no obligation to follow follow the verdict here.
Well, yes and no. I think that the interesting thing is that Pakistan itself in paragraph 130 in the court acknowledges that Pakistan itself had recommended to the court that if at all any remedy can be given to Jadhav, it is at best review and reconsideration. So this is something which we ourselves had made a submission before the court. In India, in Article 127, paragraph 127, the court says that India had said that review and reconsideration would be a highly inadequate remedy. So that is, I think, a big win for us, because something which Pakistan argued for, the court acknowledged and has in paragraph 138 mentioned that Pakistan's submission is accepted, and therefore review and reconsideration can take place. Now, what is review and reconsideration? That is something which always existed under our domestic law. So that is no new obligation which the ICJ has imposed on us. The High Court and the Supreme Court always had jurisdiction to review a judgment which is different from appeal. So I think that is something which is very important.
Also, doesn't it highlight in a way to the international sort of viewership here? I mean, this is a very major concern for India to get back this Gulbhushan Jadhav, who has been operating in Pakistan. It's a big question of what his operations have been. There's been enough evidence to prove that he was a spy. And to be fighting over the provision of consular access of the Vienna Convention, it totally sidetracks from the major issue here, which is something that ICJ has again ruled in favor of Pakistan, which is that this man was here on a sort of as a saboteur.
Absolutely. I think that is a very valid point. You have to see that the whole Indian objective of taking this case to the ICJ wasn't on consular access. The whole purpose was to delegitimize our judicial processes, to cast doubt on our internal procedures, and to kind of give this perception to the international community that we are, a state that is not responsible, that operates in a, unjust or unfair manner. And all of those points has been set aside. The court has said that we will not interfere in the internal workings of Pakistan's judiciary. We will not interfere. And I think the entire objective of India of going to the ICJ has been defeated. So I think it's a very positive development.
It's a very positive development. And what also, in general, that seems to be highlighted here, that India continued to try and sort of shift in its favor, was to question the validity of Pakistan's court system, the legal system, the military court system. Tell us a little about how, with the sort of international investigations that have taken place, how that has gone against India completely.
In fact, there are two things that one, that Pakistan's legal system, and particularly the military court system. And the second thing is that Pakistan as yet has not gone internationally to tell the world that this is what India actually has done to Pakistan in that real sense. Now, both these things have been recognized by the International Court of Justice. Now, Pakistan is not only justified, but Pakistan can go actually on the offensive that here is India claiming to be so-called democracy, trying to tarnish Pakistan's image. It is here that this is what they've been doing to Pakistan. And it is here that trying to talk about Pakistan, when you talk about the other processes which have been going on in Pakistan, for example, Hafiz Saeed and other things, India has been actually blanketing Pakistan's every judicial process as something that is being controlled by somebody else. It's not there, right there. So that, and the other thing that Pakistan has done is that get the world to recognize that as a responsible state, we could have by now executed him, and no law in the world could stop Pakistan from doing that. Pakistan has not done that. Pakistan has actually shown itself to be a responsible state, which is restrained, which is trying to tell the world that here is a country which wants peace. Here is a country which could have done 2, 3, 4, 5 things. It's not done that. It respects the international law. It respects the international opinion. So Pakistan, not only in the legal framework, but also diplomatically, Pakistan, I think, has come up very, very trumps on the issues there.
Now, you see, this is a conversation that needs to go beyond borders and needs to go to the international spectrum also, especially considering that even the Foreign Office spokesperson for Pakistan, Dr. Mohammad Feisal, has come out and said that this is basically evidence that India is a state sponsor of terrorism. And this is a very strong statement that comes out. So if one were to look at it, Mr. Jamal, to try and understand the implications across the board, how does the war of perceptions here between Pakistan and India come through?
Absolutely. I think the battle is not over yet. I think we've only won the first part of it. India was anticipating something much more severe, a much harsher indictment. But nevertheless, whatever they have had, they will try to still portray this before international forums. Now, at this point, it's very important to be cognizant of Article 94 of the UN Charter, which says that all decisions of the ICJ are binding, and if the member states do not comply with them, the Security Council can take notice of them. So this review and reconsideration that Pakistan has been asked to do, I think as a responsible state, we need to be transparent now, and we need to utilize that this review procedure to highlight all the things that India has done in our territory, all the interference, all the violations.
But when ICJ basically essentially acknowledges the validity, the authenticity of Pakistan's military court and its verdict against the plea or the Indian plea, what does that sort of give us a scenario of? How does this move forward from here?
So I think what's going to happen now is that the judicial review process will take place, in which case consular access would be given to Jadhav and he would have legal representation before that process. That process has to be transparent, and we should showcase that before the international community to show that we are a responsible state and that we are complying fully with the ICJ's decision. That will deny the Indians the opportunity to take this further to the Security Council or to the General Assembly. And I think we can actually take the onus of then projecting the transparency of our review process, and through that, once again, highlight all the activities that Mr. Jadhav was involved in Pakistan.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Jamal is joining us from Islamabad. Lieutenant General, coming back again to the point where there is essentially an acknowledgement of the authenticity in the legal system in Pakistan, especially the fact when the ICJ gave a verdict and said the military court's ruling stands and will not be thrown out, that he will not be acquitted, he will not be sent back, and just consular access be given. Tell us a little about, in terms of Pakistan portraying itself as a sort of like holding on to the law and being fair. Is this coming through across the borders? Now you feel like, is this not a big win for Pakistan right now?
I think this is, of all the things, if you take it into account, this is the biggest victory that Pakistan has. This is the biggest point that we can carry home, that our judicial process, whether military or civil, is relied upon by the international community. And the military system, court system that we have, in there also, Mr. Jadhav was provided the lawyer. He was given the choice of whichever lawyer he wants, he can get that lawyer from Pakistan. So, all in all, I think Pakistan can take a lot of positives from here. Even if consular accesses were to be accorded to him, and even if it was done before that, all that they could have done was get another lawyer for themselves. And the lawyer still would come from Pakistan. Pakistan is not bound to hire a lawyer from anywhere in the world. So, you get that lawyer on there. And like it is happening in Pakistan, the people who have been convicted by the military court in cases of terrorism, they had the right of appeal and they got into appeal. And Supreme Court has had a number of death sentences. The Supreme Court has stopped them there. So I think Pakistan, as a nation, we should be very proud of the system that we have had, internationally recognized system we had. Now is the time for Pakistan to go on the offensive, or go on the offensive internationally and tell the world, time and again, this I've been trying to highlight this point, that what India has done to Pakistan and trying to destabilize Pakistan, not only using Iranian territory. I think Iran also needs to take cognizance of this fact that here was a man who is now being recognized internationally, and here is a man who has been trying to destabilize a friendly country. The Iranians also need to be mindful of this fact.
Okay, no, this is exactly what we're talking about. Internationally, the verdict translates to. And here, let's get a comment from Mr. Feisal Naqvi, advocate of the Supreme Court. Mr. Naqvi, thank you for joining us here on Newswire. The debate ongoing is, while consular access has been given, I see the verdict says give consular access to Kulbhushan Jadhav. Let's talk about the victory for Pakistan here. Not only was the recognition of the authenticity of the Pakistan legal system here been acknowledged on an international forum, but also, in your view, what else has taken place from this verdict where Pakistan can stand up and say, well, that we stand by the law?
Well, I think, as you correctly point out, what the judgment says is that the ICJ is not in a position to sit in appeal on the Pakistan legal system, and it acknowledges that there are remedies available for those who have been convicted by military courts, and it expresses the hope that his particular sentence will be reviewed in an effective manner. And I think that is sufficient for Pakistan to, to be content with, because in terms of consular access, yes, they have not accepted our contention that he was a spy and that therefore he should not have been accorded consular access, but that is a minor issue.
Right.
The major issue was that they wanted him to be released. They wanted a declaration that no trial was possible in Pakistan.
Right.
And none of those other reliefs have been upheld. I tend to agree with the speaker before me that Pakistan should go on the offensive, and perhaps should have gone on the offensive earlier and produced more material showing how he was helping to destabilize Pakistan's government, and to, show what he was doing in Balochistan when he was caught. Because that should not be left open to conjecture. Pakistan should try and establish as much as possible in these domestic proceedings and bring this material on record so that...
But doesn't this situation right now, as it evolves, Mr. Naqvi, doesn't this give the perfect stage to provide this kind of evidence, not only just what he was doing here, but also highlight the fact that India has been, till now, to this point, even at the time of verdict, as it was highlighted, unable to explain the multiple passports, his nationality in question, which has now been accepted that he was an Indian national here. Isn't this the perfect scenario for Pakistan to move forward as with an offensive?
I think I would like to see more than that. Yes, he's an Indian with a passport and a different name. But to jump from that, yes, he may well be a spy. But I would like to see more material, and I think Pakistan should use this opportunity to produce more material showing, look, this is why he's a spy. These are the persons that he was in contact with. And given the fact that it will be a domestic legal system which will be examining the validity of his conviction, we will have less concerns about, compromising our intelligence.
Mr. Naqvi, at the same time, as part of the text of the verdict, it was also clarified here tonight, as it was read out by the president of ICJ, that the military court actually had enough evidence to charge him for espionage and terrorism and hence sentence him to death.
I don't think that the ICJ's decision really goes into the substantive merits of the military court decision. In fact, the way I read it, it's fairly clear that it's not a judgment, it's not a court of appeal. If they could examine the sufficiency of evidence before the military court, then they would have been able to do a lot more as well. What they've said is that your domestic proceedings are separate and outside the purview of the ICJ's jurisdiction, and what the ICJ can look at is only the question of whether or not he was entitled to consular access and whether that was provided to him or not.
But under the instrument, bilateral agreement between India and Pakistan on consular access, wasn't that something that basically denied Kulbhushan on that basis of India being party to it, of any consular access?
That was Pakistan's position, but it hasn't been accepted. What they've said is that, additional instruments should be read as being supplementary to the main provision, and they don't agree that there is normally, an exception in cases of espionage. So Pakistan's argument on the merits that he was not entitled to consular access because he's a spy has not been accepted in this case.
Right.
Which is, fine. That's a jurisdictional point.
Which was essentially the bone of contention here. The debate was whether that is the violation of the Vienna Convention or not.
Yes, and that has been found against Pakistan. But I think we understood from the beginning that we had a slightly weaker case on that front. The major issue for us is whether or not the other reliefs that India had asked for, that a declaration that he could in fact not be tried in Pakistan and that he should be handed back to India, those contentions have been emphatically rejected by the ICJ. And I think Pakistan's legal team should be able to take much pride in the result.
Absolutely. The fact that India's plea that he should not be tried in Pakistan, he should be taken out, has been rejected by the ICJ. A big win for Pakistan there. Thank you so much, Mr. Feisal Naqvi was speaking to us there. Right now, I'd like to also invite an international law expert, Mr. Ahmer Bilal Soofi. Thank you for joining us here on Newswire. Mr. Bilal, I want your opinion, please, of the situation that has just transpired after the ICJ verdict.
Well, I think the nation feels relieved, and I'm sure so does the legal team. They worked very hard for this matter, and I think it's an extraordinary achievement because declaratory relief has gone in favor of India, whereas substantive relief has gone in favor of Pakistan. While notwithstanding,
and sorry, Mr. Bilal Soofi, what's that in layman's words? If you would spell it out to us.
Well, in layman's word, it is that you are given a declaration that you were right when you said that he should be given access. So a declaration has been given that, yes, India is right. But the substantive consequence of that in favor of India has been denied to India. So the consequence which India was expecting to gain from this was that when it is held that Jadhav had the right to have access and get this declaration, the consequence of the declaration would be annulment of the conviction and a consequent deportation or sending back of Jadhav to India. So they got the declaration without the consequential relief which they had prayed for separately, including annulment, including sending back, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So that, in that sense, I think it has been practically a very major victory for Pakistan because you are able to retain one of those very few people who was waging war in the state, caught red-handed. And I think the additional documentation that was submitted by Pakistani lawyers also created that perception within the ICJ community that here is someone who is representing the state, and a relief of returning him back to the country from where he's coming would be actually sanctifying intervention. So it's an extraordinary relief. And I think also I feel that this judgment forever documents allegations of Pakistan relating to intervention by India inside Pakistan and its linkages to various terrorist events. And it also documents that India has been contributing towards them, has been directing them, and we have additional FIRs and other investigation pending apart from this espionage matter,
right,
which is further going to strengthen these linkages.
Right. So, Mr. Bilal Soofi, this is also an acknowledgement, and as we're hearing it from the Foreign Office here, we're hearing it from the Foreign Minister Shah Mehmood Qureshi also, that this is an acknowledgement on the international stage that India is involved in killing of innocent lives here in another state, in this case in Pakistan.
Well, yes, because this is clear implication from the judgment. The judges have chose to completely stay out of this, despite Indian insistence to argue that the travel or the voyage from the time of arrest up to the conviction was flawed from a legal point of view, from a due process point of view. That argument has been disregarded completely by the ICJ. And I believe that it is because they genuinely think, you know, when we appear before judges, whether they are domestic judges or international court judges, they are human beings. They also believe in certain things. There is a perception associated with that. So that relief is guided by the creation of the perception. And I think Pakistani team was able to successfully paint through photographs, through other documentation, through its arguments, that look, here is a man, and through the additional documents that were submitted, which will now be permanently part of ICJ archive, and Pakistani diplomats and other international community can lean on them to explain to remaining international community that, look, Pakistan has been a sufferer and India has been intervening through its state official who has given these evidence of his implication. So this is a very damaging documentation. Right now, we are celebrating only a case of an individual that he has been retained with us. We are able to prosecute. In my assessment, this judgment in this case has a long-term value for Pakistan, because by default, India, by going to ICJ, had given this opportunity to Pakistan to document what it has been alleging against India politically so far at a legal forum, the most authentic legal forum in the world.
Absolutely. Most in something that is accepted, a legal form that is accepted across the world. But also have turned, isn't that interesting, Mr. Soofi, when India has always for decades blamed Pakistan for infiltrating or perpetuating terrorism in foreign states. I mean, this situation right now doesn't make it look really well in the international light, does it?
No, it doesn't. All states in the region should act as responsible states. If there were allegations against Pakistan, we should not be supporting any non-state actor. We should ourselves be adhering to the principle of non-intervention. Support to Kashmiris is completely a separate legal bracket where they are entitled to that support. Nature of the support has to be defined under international law, and there are very specific categories of that support that Pakistan can. So I am clearly very sure that any non-state actor who is crossing international frontiers is violating international law, and he puts his state into serious jeopardy. But having said that, Indian doctrine by various thinkers in India is so manifest, so obvious, so patent, and so blatant that they will be resorting to intervention. And you have a political doctrine which is kind of a neon sign of Indian state policy, new policy, and then you see an execution of that policy and you catch someone red-handed who further discloses the details of that. Now that to me is a very, individually speaking, it's a specific separate offense of waging war. And at an international law level, it is a responsibility of the state which is now being held guilty of intervention inside the neighboring state. As far as the individual offences are concerned, clearly those offences are Section 121 of Pakistan Penal Code, which is waging war on the state. So someone was planning the waging war thing. And that's why I think when you are undertaking investigation of such person, and he is in the legal bracket of an enemy alien within Pakistani law, who are otherwise disentitled to due process and fundamental rights protection.
But very quickly, I just want to plug in here, Mr. Bilal Soofi. Here, part of the verdict, as we heard about it, where the judge said that the consular access issue did include espionage. Doesn't in itself that admit that he was here for espionage? Again, another sort of redlining under what India's national been doing here in Pakistan, something that they've been denying, that he was kidnapped from Iran.
Yeah, if you see, I mean, we haven't got the time to completely go through the judgment, but if you quickly scan through it, the sequence it records the positions of both the parties, which includes the Pakistani position, and refers to various documents. And that recording of this position, to me, is a very crucial step from Pakistan's long-term point of view. It's going to pay a lot of dividends to Pakistan. Pakistan referred to 1373 UN Security Council resolution, and so on and so forth, other non-intervention principle-based issues. So Pakistan can lean back on this formulation, its position which it has presented for the ICJ as part of its state practice and consistent state practice. Because if you give a dossier to a politician internationally in any conference, it has got very little value as opposed to submitting those documents as part of a legal brief before the most authentic global judicial forum. So as I said, the submission of all these formulations, apart from the specific relief, substantive relief Pakistan has got, Pakistan will continue to benefit from it. And I, for one, always said that this is a mistake India has committed by coming to ICJ. They should have resorted to bilateral things. And by going to ICJ, they allowed Pakistan an opportunity to document instances of their intervention, which Pakistan did quite well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bilal Soofi. Some very wise words there. We'll take a quick short break. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Newswire from the Lahore studios, coming to you live. I'm Ayza Omar here. I'm joined by Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa. And also now joining us from Islamabad is Mr. Oves Anwar. He is the director of the Conflict Law Center at RSIL in Islamabad. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Oves. You've heard the verdict. The word is out. What do you make of it? Or what, in terms of what India could have possibly gained for taking the case to the ICJ in the first place?
Well, let me begin by saying that I think India's been this entire exercise was a bit of a waste of time. In essence, what India has been granted by the ICJ was already available to them under Pakistani law. It was available to Kulbhushan Jadhav under Pakistani law, which is essentially judicial review. So the sentence that the relief that India had sought was annulment of the decision, release of their citizen and transfer to Pakistan, safe passage to Pakistan. In lieu of that, they had requested that that Pakistan be directed to annul the decision, and that the case be transferred to a civilian court, where consular access be given, and then India be given the right to provide legal representation and all of those things. What India had said itself was that a review and recommendation would be a highly inadequate relief in this case. This is India's own admission. And therefore, now the court granting that highly inadequate relief to them seems to have defeated their case entirely. I think the only success that India can actually claim out of this is consular access. But consular access would have made a difference to the case if it had been done, if Pakistan's trial of Kulbhushan Jadhav had been annulled, and that India could then have pleaded the case. So now the consular access is limited to looking after his healthcare, well-being, perhaps rights of communication to his family, etc. So it's really not going to change the verdict in any sense in that way.
So I just want to expand a little on this aspect of review of consular access here. If India was basically just looking out for making sure that Jadhav is in good condition, is getting enough to eat, has his medical condition looked after, why would it go all the way to the ICJ and throw such a hoopla about this?
Well, India was obviously expecting a lot more from the ICJ, and they certainly did not get that. India wanted the entire trial to be annulled for a retrial to be taking place on a civilian court, and that's what they've said in their prayers. But that wasn't granted to them. So India wanted to have a fresh trial in this case, and for the verdict to be vacated. That was denied to them, and that is something that will be very hard for them to swallow at this stage. As for the review and reconsideration aspect, Pakistan now is under an obligation to, by a means of its own choosing, to review and reconsider this particular trial, how it took place. And what they have to specifically answer, or the TORs of any judicial body that will be reviewing this, would be, was the denial of consular access prejudicial to the trial? In other words, had consular access been given to this individual, to Jadhav, would the verdict of his trial be any different? And this is what a Pakistani court or a Pakistani judicial body will have to determine.
And this is something that India would have to accept either way.
Absolutely. I mean,
there is no process in which there would be an appeal to any other international judicial organ like the ICJ. Other than the ICJ, it can't go back to the ICJ, that's for sure.
So ICJ decisions do not have an appeal. There are two mechanisms that exist. One is a request for interpretation, where the scope and meaning of any ICJ decision has to then be, the ICJ can then give an authoritative interpretation of that.
Right.
So any party can approach it. India can approach it. What does review and reconsideration in this context mean?
Right.
But again, that does not change the decision. And secondly, there is, if new facts are discovered, then a revision can take place under Article 61 of the ICJ statute.
So when you say new evidence resurfaces, what could that possibly be?
Well, it's difficult to say, but if India were to come upon particular, say, egregious violations of the Vienna Convention, but in this case, I mean, whatever's happened has happened, and that's been declared in India.
And it's happened under the spotlight. There was a lot of allegations from India that this confession that Kulbhushan Jadhav has given, where he accepts essentially that he was working under the behest of RAW, India's premier spy agency, and all of that was under duress, and then. So on that context, the ICJ, has it taken a stand on whether this is a reasonable doubt it had, or it's not in its jurisdiction either?
Well, that certainly wasn't within its jurisdiction. I think there was a lot of hysteria built up on both sides of the border regarding this case, and thinking that it's something to do with his innocence or guilt. It had nothing to do with that. It was simply whether or not consular access should have been given. What needs to be clarified is that regardless of whether consular access was given or is not given or is later given in the future, the fate of Kulbhushan Jadhav will be determined by a Pakistani court.
Right, and that is if it chooses to review and reconsider, because at the same time, they haven't thrown out the verdict. ICJ has actually recognized what Pakistan's military court sentenced. Is that true?
Absolutely. I think the Indians were also trying to use this as a propaganda tool, and they were trying to malign Pakistan's judicial processes, especially the field general court-martial process. And what the ICJ has done is very intelligently refrained from delving into any of that. India, what it tried to do was base its strategy on an evolution of the law, that consular access is a fundamental human right. But had they looked at the precedent of the ICJ, in the Avina judgment, the ICJ has clearly referenced that while it is certainly an important right, it is not a fundamental human right. India tried to conflate it with Article 14 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and make it a human right in that sense relative to due process. That was not granted to India, and that was taken away.
Okay. Now, something here, Lieutenant General, I just want to read out a tweet that's out from our Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, where he says, Commander Jadhav shall remain in Pakistan. He shall be treated in accordance with the laws of Pakistan. This is a victory of Pakistan. And on the note of what our guest, Mr. Oves, has just said from Islamabad, he mentioned that India's objections to our military court sentence was, and the military system here, the legal system in Pakistan was that it was inadequate. ICJ has pretty much turned around and said, well, you've got to deal with the legal system because we accept it as adequate. What do you think India really gained from all of this?
I think India lost on a number of other accounts also. One, having to accept a spy, own it up, is a big defeat by any country in the world. Nobody accepts that kind of a thing.
Right.
Number two, criminalization of all this action and that basis provided to Pakistan to now beat India with internationally is another plus that Pakistan has now. Third, of course, our judicial system has been vindicated. And fourth is that having filed an appeal for mercy, Jadhav himself not only has confessed to whatever he has been doing, and this was done after his family had met him. That means kind of access was already provided to over and above what normally should be done. So Pakistan, all in all, I think should be satisfied with what he has gained so far. And India needs to look back at whatever it wanted to achieve. Basically, my own thought process right from the day one was that India is actually trying to undermine Pakistan's judicial process. And as a result, the trials going on against all the terrorists, which had been supported by Indians in a different way, India would then take it 2, 3, 4 steps forward.
Right. Well, that's true. That's something that has come to the forefront in the international sort of arena here. But do you think India's learned a lesson here that it can't go ahead and continue this kind of infiltrating in other states, perpetuating terrorism and violence? Do you think it's learned some kind of lesson
India won't learn a lesson, no. If we expect that India from now on will become a good Vice Scout, no, it won't. In fact, we'll find other ways to destabilize Pakistan and use other means of doing it, because that is how they work, that is how Modi Saab is planned for this region, that's what he's trying to do to this region, in fact.
Right. So, Mr. Oves, let's get your take on this also. What could possibly India might have learned from this? Are you of the same opinion as Lieutenant General here, who says, nope, they are not going to turn into a good Boy Scout after this incident, they're not really going to stop? What do you think? Does this set a precedent for them to back off?
Well, I mean, I'll stick to the legal realm, and I think legally India has been quite shy of trying to internationalize a lot of the issues. Kashmir is one primary issue where they've always said bilateralism. And what we see here is one of India's attempts where they thought that this would suit them to internationalize the issue, and it clearly backfired. So I think India, what it's learned is that the international route or maintaining the bilateralism is probably what has suited them so far. And they'll probably go back into their shell as they have.
So what steps now are going to follow from this in terms of what the law states? You mentioned that going to the ICJ in the first place really didn't make sense because Pakistan law provided for all of those provisions for review and addressing their concerns. What do you think is going to happen now?
So what I think now, the ball's in Pakistan's court, and what Pakistan will be doing now is by choosing its own methods, it will choose a judicial body that will review this. This could be taken up through the judicial review mechanism, which the High Court has under the writ jurisdiction that courts have, under Article 199 or 184 with the Supreme Court. Once this is done, then they will give a decision on whether the prejudice actually took place, whether the denial of consular access prejudices his case. And if the Pakistani courts determine that, yes, it did prejudice, then they will order a retrial and order consular access to be given then. If, however, the courts say that no prejudice took place, that he was given the rights that he would have received in any case, that the Pakistani legal system provided all of the rights were given to him under the Pakistan Army Act, under the Field General Court Martial regulations, the Qanun-e-Shahadat, if those were given to him, then the sentence will stand. And then what he will have is perhaps some mercy petitions that he still has remaining with the President of Pakistan.
Okay. So also, Now, also, let me ask you another related to this, the fact that the sentence will stand. Is there a possibility that Pakistan, under some international law, is not obligated to retry and review?
So there is no obligation right now. Neither has the ICJ said anything to retry. It is only to review his case. Retry would be if, in our review, a Pakistani body decided to change that. I think the other question you're asking is, could we decide not to abide by the ICJ's decision? I think that would be ill-advised, primarily because Pakistan, one, is a responsible member of the Comity of Nations, and it would be unnecessary, frankly, to even go there, because the regular legal process provides for all of these protections to Kulbhushan Jadhav anyway in Pakistan. So we don't have to do much from the ordinary course of events to comply with this decision. And once we have complied, then the stay on execution that the ICJ has given would also be automatically vacated.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much there, Mr. Anwar, joining us from Islamabad. Mr. Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, something that I've been meaning to ask for so long now. The verdict is out. It was Kulbhushan Jadhav. I mean, he's operating in Pakistan for 10 years, right? We've got enough evidence, left, right, and center, to convict him in any court, essentially. After the ICJ verdict, it's pretty much clear that the sentence by the military court stands. He's not being sent back to India. All of these are great wins, but it still poses the question, why him? Why not those other prisoners detained in Pakistan, Indians, under espionage and spy charges?
Because this guy happens to be an important person. He was rejected twice for his job that he applied for to become a spy for India, and finally accepted when Mr. Ajit Doval, who happens to be his relative, came into power, and that he allowed him there. It's a big slap on his face, the Indian National Security Advisor's face, that his relative, whom he had bypassed the system to get enrolled into this kind of a job, was caught and has become an embarrassment not only for him but for entire India. And for quite some time to come, our friends have said, given something to Pakistan to beat India with all along and everywhere, and played it up in a way that Pakistan's stand is vindicated. It's not Pakistan which is actually responsible for terrorism in the region. The terrorism sponsored, initiated by India in the region, to start with East Pakistan and then on what is happening in Pakistan. So I think sometimes the nature helps in different ways.
Right.
And this is where Pakistan has been helped in a big way. With regard to the consular access, Pakistan, in fact, that is not really specific to Pakistan. This decision that has come actually allows consular access to almost all those who have been declared as spies. But India is not going to accept the others as their spies because they don't have to be as important for them.
Not so important, or the fact that there wasn't a trail that was proven, the connection between Raw and the person who was detained, which was Kulbhushan Jadhav here, as compared to the others who were detained.
Those, Pakistan gets those proofs also,
right.
But the level, happens to be a very senior level. The kind of, the people who actually handle the law don't come in the field themselves. Previously, what all we have been capturing are those operatives in the field. They aren't so important, really, like, sacrificing them doesn't become that.
We're on our last minute, and I really want to get so much more in, but we'll end with this point. There seems to be so many parallels happening at the same time. I mean, after February, after the Balakot incident, there were so many claims by India, whether it was downing an F-16, whether it was bombing a militant camp, all of which the evidence never showed up. And now this. How does India look right now, and how do you think they're going to react to this verdict?
India's propaganda machine already, I was listening to their media, they're already in a hype that they have actually been able to achieve and almost reach the moon. But on ground, they understand where they are now. The Air Force knows where they are, and they are in a very big problem. They had a number of accidents thereafter also. The armed forces know where they are because they have a serious problem of deficiencies and desertions and the kind of dissatisfaction within the forces. And now India getting one of its major spies caught in Pakistan, involved in terrorism, those cases are still to be publicized internationally. I think India is where Pakistan should want India to be at this point.
Okay, then, Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa joining us here in the Lahore studios. Thank you so much for giving us your time. We were talking about Kulbhushan Yadav's verdict from the ICJ, which was essentially a big win for Pakistan. Not only was his sentence by the Pakistan military court still stands, wasn't thrown out. Also, there will be no acquittal. He will not be sent back to India. And at the same time, a very key point established here across the board in the international audience, in front of all the regional actors, that Kulbhushan Yadav was a spy operating on Pakistani soil. That is something that India also admits now. With that, we've got to wrap up. We'll see you next week. Till then, goodbye.